The toughest guy you ever played against?
Toughest guy I ever played against. Guys, but the guy that always gave me the most problems actually was Tracy McGrady.
Tracy McGrady?
Yeah.
Tracy McGrady.
Yeah.
He works for us. Magic, you say? How? I mean, you couldn't say enough good things about him.
This dude was unbelievable, man.
How so?
Unbelievable. Because he could do everything. I mean, I think I told him one time, I said, bro, you could do everything I could do on the court, but you were 6'10". Literally everything. I mean, he had no weaknesses, offensively or defensively. And he was a nightmare to guard. I always wish if I had one player to play with, it was this guy. Because listen, he could do everything I could do, but he was taller.
Tracy McGrady was born May 24th, 1979 in a city called Bartlett, Florida. McGrady's father was absent for most of his life, so he was raised alongside his younger brother Chancellor by his mother and his grandmother. They grew up in Auburndale, a city located in Polk County, Florida. Tracy didn't only play basketball growing up, he also played baseball. He would actually play both sports all the way up to his junior year at Auburndale High School. Tracy was really good at basketball ever since he was a young kid. He was well known in his county for being an elite level talent. In his last year at Auburndale High School, Tracy would average over 23 points per game, along with 12 rebounds, 4 assists, and nearly 5 blocks per game. Outside of his local community though, nobody really knew who he was. That was until 1996, when he was invited to the very prestigious ABCD camp his senior season. The ABCD camp was a camp founded by the legendary Sonny Vaccaro that started in 1984 and lasted until 2006. The camp was known for gathering the best high school players in the country under one gym, allowing Division I coaches the opportunity to scout and recruit the players in person. When McGrady got the invite, he was ecstatic and saw it as an opportunity to show coaches all around America that he was on the same level with the other highly scouted prospects at that time. Even though he was excited, McGrady still had doubts going into the camp. He was very confident in his abilities. He thought that he was a talented basketball player, but like we said earlier in the video, nobody knew who he was outside of his county in Florida. This was going to be the best competition he played in his life. You never know. You might believe in your ability because you're used to playing against certain guys, but when you step outside of that rim and when you're talking about the best players in the country, you want to see how good you really are, right? Tracy would actually be the very last person to be invited to this camp. But after this camp was over, Tracy showed them what he was capable of. Not only were college scouts impressed with the talent he possessed, but some NBA scouts had Tracy on their radar as well. After the ABCD camp, McGrady received an offer from Coach Joe Hopkins to transfer to Mount Zion, a high school located in Durham, North Carolina. McGrady would accept the offer to transfer schools, and he would have an exceptional senior season. He would average over 27 points per game, along with 8 rebounds and 7 assists. He would also be named the McDonald's All-American, USA Today High School Player of the Year, McDonald's Mr. Basketball, and lead his school to be ranked the #2 ranked team in the country. McGrady was a 6'8" guard who was an extremely gifted athlete. When asked, he compared his game to Penny Hardaway, but the obvious comparison in my opinion would be Paul George. He was very quick for his size, making him hard to match up with. He had a nice handle with the ball, which allowed him to get to his spots. He also had a smooth and consistent jump shot that defenders had to respect. Pair all those things with a 42-inch max vert and you get a Hall of Fame caliber offensive talent. The only weakness in McGrady's offensive game was his lack of movement. McGrady needed the ball in his hands in order to be most effective, rarely ever moving without the ball. McGrady would obviously receive a lot of attention from multiple D1 programs, but the school that made the biggest impression on Tracy was the Kentucky Wildcats. I took my visit to a couple colleges, but I went to Kentucky and I saw how those boys were living. I said, this is where I want to go to school. I was always a fan before I went there. When I took that visit, bro, and I seen how they were living up there as college athletes, I want to go to Kentucky. All the signs seemed to have been pointing to Tracy becoming a Wildcat. But like the old saying goes, money talks.
In my coach's office, he was like, I know you want to go to Kentucky. I know you want to go to college, but after I tell you this, you're going to forget all about that. I'm like, after you tell me what? He was like, I got a $12 million deal for you. I say, from who? He said, from Adidas. Oh, shit, let's sign. I said, let's sign. I say, $12 million, bro? He was like, yeah, man. He was like, they want to offer you 6 years, $12 million. My college dream went out the window. I signed for that bag.
So fast.
And that was it, bro.
That offer may seem small compared to some of the shoe contracts players today are signing, but back then, that was more money than Adidas was offering Kobe. Add on to the fact that scouts were telling him that he was a surefire lottery pick, and college became an afterthought to this kid. Before we continue on with the video, I just wanted to let you guys know to follow all of my social medias in the description. This would be the best way for you guys to stay up to date with when I'm posting. My life is a little bit hectic, so I'm gonna try and be as consistent as possible. Also, if you enjoy the video, please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. McGrady was selected with the 9th overall pick by the Toronto Raptors. Tracy's rookie year would be very challenging to say the least. There actually would be multiple factors that would play a part in him struggling his rookie season. First issue he was dealing with was, well, he wasn't playing. The GM for the Raptors at that time was Isaiah Thomas, and during the draft, they did not expect to have the opportunity to draft McGrady in the first place. When McGrady fell to 9, the Raptors eagerly took him. They knew McGrady oozed potential, and that the sky was the limit for this kid. After the preseason, the Raptors had all-star aspirations for their new draft pick, thinking that he could potentially be a franchise player in the coming years. If they had those type of expectations for Tracy McGrady, then why did they play him only 13 minutes per game? Well, the guy who drafted him, Isaiah Thomas, actually resigned from his position earlier that season. When I heard the news, it really hurt me because Isaiah was like a father figure. McGrady says, "I felt lost, like everybody else was in the boat and I was drowning out in the water." The team wasn't even going anywhere. They only won 16 games this season. He would start to get a little bit more playing time after his head coach resigned. There was an even bigger issue that Tracy was facing during his rookie season. He was lonely. Think about it. He was an 18-year-old kid living in another country away from his family and friends. He wasn't going to college where there would be kids all around him his age. He was getting up to go to practice with grown men who had families. And if he wasn't traveling around the world, then he was chilling in his luxurious apartment all day. That may seem like a dream scenario for some of y'all, but y'all have to remember, the transition between childhood and adulthood is very challenging, especially when you're that young. Tracy said that he was so bored that he would sleep up to 20 hours a day during that period in his life. I actually found an article talking about how McGrady would make countless long-distance calls to friends and family back home, with his cell phone bill at the end of the month getting as high as $1,500. These boys have bread, sheesh. To say that McGrady had a rough year in '97 would be an understatement. Little did he know, though, a conversation he had in the summer of that year at a family reunion was his introduction to his brand new partner in crime. Tracy, after being drafted by the Raptors, would travel back to Atlanta in July of 1997 to attend the family reunion. While at the reunion, the woman would strike up a conversation with the young man. After talking for a little while, the woman would ask him if he knew her grandson that went by the name of Vince Carter. McGrady would respond with, "Sure, I know of the kid." They would occasionally play rec in North Carolina where Carter went to school at. Well, she would tell him that her father-in-law is the brother of his grandmother, making them second cousins. Even though they didn't necessarily share the same blood, they might as well have. After McGrady found that out, Carter was probably on the other end of a couple of those 1,500 phone calls during Tracy McGrady's rookie year. After Vince completed his junior year at UNC, he would choose to skip his senior season to enter the 1998 NBA draft. During the '98 draft, Toronto would swap picks with Golden State, landing them Carter, instantly giving them the reputation of being one of the most exciting teams in the NBA. During the lockout season, McGrady's numbers would improve, but it was obvious that he still needed to develop his game. After his third year in the league, though, McGrady was starting to show flashes of his greatness. Him and his cousin Vince were a devastating duo who actually helped lead the Toronto Raptors to his first postseason appearance in franchise history. Even though they would get swept in the first round, the future looked bright in Toronto. Even though Tracy was a free agent after this season, him and Vince were like twins. The Raptors were almost certain they would bring back McGrady. Nobody was ready for what was about to happen next. McGrady would actually make the decision to go back home and join the Orlando Magic rather than coming back to the Raptors. The deal would end up being executed through a sign and trade deal that sent the Raptors a future 2005 first-round pick. McGrady would sign a 7-year, $92.8 million contract with the Magic to team up with All-Star Grant Hill. McGrady left the Raptors simply because he felt like he wasn't getting the playing time he deserved. Even though he had a great season with the squad, he only started in 34 games that season. Not only was he not starting every game, but both his agent and the Adidas rep wanted him to be traded to a U.S. city simply to boost his marketing potential. McGrady loved to play in Toronto, but the potential to play in his home state and being the co-star of that team was too good of an offer for McGrady to pass up. Looking back, McGrady said that he regretted leaving Toronto, and there'd be good reason for him to regret that decision. The co-star that Tracy was supposed to play with, Grant Hill, would succumb to multiple ankle injuries, forcing him to only play 47 games total with his time with the Magic. This would force McGrady to become the true #1 option, and despite the question marks coming into the season, McGrady would have a breakout year. He would average over 26 points per game this season while being voted into the All-NBA second team. He was also voted as the league's most improved player while also being named an All-Star for the first time in his career. He will also lead the Magic to the 7th best record in the Eastern Conference with a 43-39 record. The Magic would end up being matched up with the number 2 seeded Bucks. Though the team was outmatched, Tracy played a remarkable series, averaging 33 points per game for this series, including a 42-point masterpiece performance in Game 3. Legendary writer Bill Simmons would name this game Tracy McGrady's Superstar Audition Tape. The Magic would eventually lose the series in 4, but it was clear that McGrady was a household name and one of the most lethal scorers in the league. In his second year with the Magic, it would go very similar to the first. Tracy would put up great numbers, this time actually making the first team All-NBA this season, along with another All-Star appearance. He would lead the Magic to a 5th best record in the East this season, and they would be matched up against the number 4 seeded Hornets. The Magic would lose in the first round again in 4 games, as the team did not have enough firepower around McGrady to make a serious run. In McGrady's 3rd season with Orlando, he would raise his game to a whole nother level. By this point now, Tracy McGrady was playing probably the best basketball of his career. There was literally nothing you could do with this guy. Even when the defenders would play good defense, he would still score sometimes. Sometimes he would just make the game look simple. He would average over 32 points per game this season, winning his first scoring title in his career. Despite his amazing play, Orlando would barely finish over 500, finishing 42-40, giving them the 8th best record in the Eastern Conference. Tracy was literally willing his Magic team to the playoffs. This team seriously had no business being in a playoff series this season. However, the Eastern Conference was a little weaker than most seasons, with the record only putting them 8 games back from the first place Pistons. This would end up being their first round matchup. After Game 1, everyone around America realized that the Pistons might have an issue on their hands. Tracy would put together another playoff masterpiece, scoring a team playoff record 43 points in a 99-94 win. Head coach of the Pistons, Rick Carlisle, was quoted to have said post-game, "This guy is arguably the best player on the planet." He would one-up that performance in Game 2, scoring 46 points. Unfortunately for him, his teammates were only able to contribute another 31 points, and the Magic would lose by 12. The series would now head back to Orlando, and the Magic would win the next 2 games of the series, putting the Pistons on the brink of elimination. After taking that 3-1 series lead, Tracy in the postgame interview would unfortunately at 23 years old and say something he probably shouldn't have said. "It feels good to get to the second round." Those 9 words, uttered by McGrady, would make headlines on every national media outlet, changing the entire series. He unintentionally woke up a sleeping giant. The Pistons would win the next 3 games of their series, and they wouldn't just win those games, they would dismantle the Magic with none of the 3 games even being close. What would make this collapse even more ironic was that if the Magic would have went up by 3-1 against the Pistons last season, they would have actually moved on to the second round, with the first round being a best-of-5 series instead of a best-of-7. This was the first season they switched to a best-of-7 series, adding even more salt into the wound. This result would be a lasting stain on McGrady's career that he ultimately never recovered from. He would still play at an elite level, but this was one of the best chances he had at winning a playoff series. His 4th and final season with the Magic could only be described as simply a disaster. For starters, the team would start with a putrid 1-10 record. This would result in Doc Rivers being fired. Even after firing Doc, the team would not be able to recover, finishing off the year with the worst record in the Eastern Conference. Despite the team's struggles, McGrady would still lead the league in scoring, averaging 28 points per game, while also being selected to the All-NBA second team. With McGrady playing at this high of a level, there was obvious friction between him and the Magic front office. This would eventually lead to a breakup between the 2 parties at the end of the season. On June 29, 2004, McGrady would be traded to the Houston Rockets in a 7-player deal, teaming him up with the new NBA freak Yao Ming. Tracy and the Rockets would start the 04-05 season slow, but the season would take a turn on December 9th. This would be the night McGrady would make the 13 points and 35-second comeback against the San Antonio Spurs. He would convert on 4 consecutive 3-point shots, one being a 4-point play and another being a game-winning bucket with 2 seconds left to play in the game. At the end of the season, Houston would bounce back from their slow start and ended the year 51-31, which would get them the 5th seed in the playoffs. Tracy would end the year averaging 25 points per game while being selected to his 5th consecutive All-Star appearance and 3rd All-NBA team. In the playoffs, the Rockets would be matched up against their in-state rival, the Dallas Mavericks. The Rockets would surprisingly win the first 2 road games of the series. In NBA history, the team that wins the first 2 games of the series on the road ends up winning the series 84% of the time. Despite what history said, the Rockets would end up dropping the next 3 straight games to the Mavs. They would bounce back at home in Game 6, but in Game 7, Houston would get run out of the building, losing by 40. The next season would be disappointing for T-Mac and the Rockets. This was the first season that McGrady would miss significant time due to injury, appearing in only 47 games this year. He would suffer from back spasms throughout the year. Despite the injury, he would still have a stellar season, making another All-Star team, but the team would miss the playoffs with T-Mac's absence. In the 06-07 season, McGrady was starting to feel the heat from the media. His team had just missed the playoffs the previous season, and he had plenty of opportunities to make it out of the first round. If he was going to make a playoff run, this would be the team to do it with. The Rockets would finish with a 52-30 record, giving them a home court advantage in the first round against the Utah Jazz. The team would each win their respective games at home, setting up an all-or-nothing Game 7. The Rockets would leave it all on the court, but they would unfortunately fall to Utah 103-99, sending McGrady home in the first round again. After this game, McGrady post-game was simply devastated.
I said, this team is going to go as far as I take them. And, I tried my best. I tried, man. I just, maybe I could have made an extra play here. Maybe I could have got those loose rebounds that we needed in the fourth quarter that we didn't get down the stretch of the game. Maybe I could have did more, but it didn't happen. I tried, man. I tried.
Despite the devastating way the 06-07 season ended, Houston would try their best to move forward. They would win a historic 22 straight games this year. At the time, it was the second longest winning streak ever in NBA history. The team would improve upon their record from the previous year, posting a 55-27 record. By the end of the season, however, McGrady's body was barely still holding together. He was suffering from both a shoulder and knee injury, which required him to receive pain-killing injections and having fluid drained from both parts of his body in order for him to play. They would meet up with Utah again in the first round of the playoffs, and a similar story would play out, this time the Jazz eliminating them in 6 games. By this time, it seemed like McGrady was not going to make a deep playoff run in his career, and that's kind of how the rest of his career played out. Following being eliminated by Utah for the second time, McGrady would undergo arthroscopic surgery for both his shoulder and knee. Early into the year, he would miss up to 18 games nursing these injuries, and by February 24th, Tracy was shut down for the rest of the year. It was obvious the injuries were hindering his performance, with his scoring averages becoming similar to what he produced early in his career with the Raptors. Despite McGrady's absence, Houston would rally to end the year, actually making the playoffs. What's even more surprising is that they didn't just sneak into the playoffs as an 8 seed, they won 53 games this season. They would then accomplish something in the playoffs this season that Tracy's never done in his entire career. They won a round, eliminating the 4-seeded Portland Trailblazers, moving on to the second round. They would actually come super close to moving on to the Western Conference Finals, taking the eventual champion Lakers to 7 games. This had to have been tough for McGrady to watch. If he would have been healthy enough, who knows what could have happened in that Lakers series. Some may disagree and say the Rockets played better without McGrady, but I don't know if that's true. There were some games during the Blazers series that the Rockets really could have used Tracy's shot creation. It also would have helped to have him during the Lakers series, considering Yao would go down in Game 3, forcing him to miss the rest of the series. The Rockets would only score 70 points in Game 7, and I know a healthy T-Mac would have rose to the occasion like he has multiple times in his career. Anyways though, T-Mac would continue his significant decline to start the 09-10 season, and McGrady would continue to rehab from his injury from last season. He would eventually make his return on December 15th, only playing 7 minutes off the bench. After only 6 games, the Rockets had seen enough and decided to shut McGrady down again so they could look to trade him to another team. It wasn't that Tracy didn't want to play, he wanted to be out there more than anything. He just wasn't the same player anymore. He would be traded in a 3-team deal to the Knicks. Tracy would then bounce around the league for the next few years, showing flashes of his former greatness, but never ultimately getting back to his prime self. He would spend time with the Knicks, Pistons, Hawks, Spurs, and a year in the CBA where he averaged 25 points per game for the season. On August 26, 2013, McGrady would announce his retirement on First Take, ending his 16-year career. Despite his shortcomings in the playoffs, Tracy McGrady is an all-time great. He is recognized as being one of the greatest players to ever lace up a pair of sneakers, scoring over 18,000 points in his career. After his playing career, McGrady would not disappear from the spotlight, becoming a well-known analyst on ESPN. That wasn't the only thing Tracy's been up to. He has been a very savvy businessman with a number of investments in companies such as the 7-1 Sports Group and Entertainment. He's also founded his own basketball league called the OBL, the Ones Basketball League. It's a one-on-one basketball league that brings talented players together all across the world. Tracy McGrady is married with 4 kids and living a comfortable life while also being able to stay close to the game that he loves. It might be fun to have these discussions about which player is greater than the other, but we have to remember to keep things in perspective. McGrady's resume may not stack up to other players of the past, but if a player is good enough to be a problem for Kobe, I don't care who you are, you're going to be a problem for everybody.